Hi, you guys. This
Hi
is,
there.
I'm thinking it's April
Oh,
8th, and I don't know
yes.
why that is. It's March
March.
8th of 2023.
Hey, got it right.
Got it right. I never get that right, but I got it right today. Okay, so tonight we are at a different time, starting at 5 o'clock rather than 5 o'clock Central Standard Time rather than 6 o'clock. And that couldn't be helped. But as it is, we're getting late started late because it's 5:45, so we might as well have started at 6. Anyway, not the point. Here's the thing. I'm glad you guys are here. I'm glad that that everybody is for the most part well. Marilyn said that she was a little under the weather, but we prayed for her. Trish had a 3-day bout of the flu, and she's doing great now. Look at her color's good, her eyes are bright, everything.
There's one called you.
Sorry. Sylvia, are you still
I'm sorry. I needed
okay.
an ice pack. My husband.
Ice pack?
Sorry.
Okay.
So he just dropped it off.
Sylvia's getting an ice pack. And isn't that like something up in the Arctic? Like an ice pack? Isn't that where seals and the polar bears go and hang out? Anyway, no, that's pack ice. Pack ice?
Let it go.
Okay, I'll let it go. Okay. And so so anyway, there are some people who couldn't be with us tonight, and so please remember them in your prayers and in your thoughts, and please keep them safe. And we've given their evening as far as we can over to the Lord tonight, so we're going to go ahead and move on. We are in the book of Numbers, the continuing study of the book of Numbers, and we are beginning chapter 26.
Yay!
Yes, only 10 more chapters, and we will be out of the ever-expanding, unending book of Numbers.
26?
Yes, 26. The first and beginning part of chapter 26.
Your words are bigger.
Would you like to use this one?
No,
Okay.
No, you're fine.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Yesterday was Purim, which was the celebration of what took place 2,500 years ago, well, approximately 2,500 years ago, when Esther, a Jewish slave, was elevated to the position of the queen. And there was a very selfish, self-centered, and evil man named Haman, or Haman. I believe it's Haman, but it could be Haman. And he hated the Jewish people that were dragged into their country.
Yeah.
And he had a real hatred specifically for a man named Mordecai, who was a Jewish man that refused to bow to Haman. And because Haman's just another guy, and there's no reason in the world to bow to another guy. Regardless of who they may believe they are, they're still made in the likeness and image of God. And God gives them their authority and their throne and their authority and position. And so we bow to God. During the days prior to the American Revolution, there was a lot of that going on too, where the British soldiers were insisting that that people acquiesce and bow and show homage to the King of England, and the American residents of the Americas at that time, because there wasn't a United States, so the colonies, their response was, "We have no king but Jesus." And so and that's just the way that is. So anyway, Haman had the king. He talked the king into signing a piece of legislation that was going to really do a number on the Jewish people. This was Haman's plan. And Esther, his wife,
whose wife?
was Mordecai's niece. Esther was the king's wife,
okay.
And one of them, and she was Mordecai's niece. But Haman didn't know this. Anyway, she spoke to Mordecai because she was, she's like, "What do I do? Our people are vastly and dangerously threatened by what's taking place with Haman." And Mordecai made this remark to her: it could be that you were born for days such as these. that this is why you were born, to effect a change. And so she broke ranks, if you will, and left her station and went and approached the king directly, which is a death sentence. You just don't break protocol and go enter the presence of the king uninvited. But he recognized her and he allowed her to come forward. And she petitioned the king to make a change to Haman's edict, and he did. And in fact, it turned out very well. I talked about this last week about the book of Esther, and I'm really excited for the point and the day when we get into that. And we may at some point skip ahead and just go right to Esther, because it is really worth reading. It really is. It's a phenomenal book. It's a phenomenal story, and it shows the grace of God in so many different ways. And it shows that though the circumstances that we find ourselves in at any given time, by the throes and the authority of the government that's over us, all of those authorities are always subject to the will of God. And that God is in charge, God is sovereign, God sits on his throne, and he is there, and there is nothing that can dispute his authority and the righteousness and the truth that is God.
Well,
and so it's
it would be good to read Esther today, because today is the International Day of Women.
Oh, it is. I forgot about that.
Yes.
I don't know what that means though. We
the
have
International
a day.
Day of Women.
We have a
Mhm.
day.
Is that I have no idea what that means. What does that mean?
I don't know. I didn't even know it was. I heard it too, and I was like, I don't know what that means.
They're just honoring women, and Esther
Wow.
would be a beautiful person to honor today.
Well,
So,
okay. Are you guys up for reading Esther today?
yes.
I kind of want. Well, yeah, whatever. I'm
Is that
open.
okay?
Mhm.
It's
Where is it?
It's the Old Testament, just before Job.
Oh gosh, backwards or forwards?
It's forward from where we are in Numbers.
The Kings? No, the Book of Esther is all by itself.
The book of Esther is a standalone. It's after Samuel, after Kings, after Chronicles, after Ezra, Nehemiah, and then Esther. And after Esther
Oh,
comes
after
Job.
Job. There we go. Just before Psalms.
Yes.
Oh wait, it must be. Wait, why is? Okay, hold on.
Got
I
it.
was like, is it short? I don't get it.
It's an 8-page story.
I'm still on Job. There's no Esther.
It's right before Esther, Job.
It's
Before Esther.
yeah,
Before.
right before Job.
Before Job. I'm like, where'd it go?
Which Bible are you using?
I have ours, our black one.
Okay, then it would be page hang on,
364.
513,
Or
I see it.
364.
No, I have 5.
510.
There's a little
Okay, got it. Thank you. Gosh, I
Mhm.
should know this.
kitty.
Why
Sorry.
should you know this?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
you
I
should.
should.
Don't should yourself.
I should. Okay, I'm here.
Okay.
Esther, page 510.
Let me know when everybody's there.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Isn't her real name Hadassah or something?
I can't find it. Oh, I found it. Thank you for your patience, people. Thank you.
Isn't it really
Hey.
like a
Did
a
you get
Jewish
it?
name?
Everybody's there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay,
go
the
ahead.
book of Esther. Okay, the banquets of the king. Now it took place in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days, as King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne, which was at the citadel in Susa, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his princes and attendants
Jeez.
and army officers of Persia and Media and nobles and princes of his provinces being in his presence. And he displayed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor of his great majesty for many days. 180 days, as a matter of fact. 6 months of this. 6 months of displaying his glory. Okay. I'd say that he's a little bit self-indulgent, but what can I say?
Kind of a narcissist.
Yeah, it
I
could
was
be.
thinking that.
When these days were completed, the king gave a banquet lasting another 7 days for all the people who were present at the citadel in Susa, from the greatest to the least, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. Okay, so it's been a massive celebration of the king for 6 months, and now he's extended it to a 7-day feast following the 6 months. There were hangings of fine white and violet linen held by cords of fine purple linen on silver rings and marble columns. and couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry. I think that's right. Porphyry? I don't know, marble. Mother of pearl and precious stones. Drinks were
Porphyry.
served. What?
Porphyry.
That's easy for you to
Sorry.
say. Porphyry. Okay, thank you. Drinks were served in golden vessels of various kinds, and the royal wine was plentiful according to the king's bounty. We're not talking about paper towel or a ship. Bounty,
Okay,
like
let's
his
just go.
plentifulness.
Hmm.
The drinking was done according to the law. There was no compulsion, for so the king had given orders to each official of his household that he should do according to the desires of each person. Drink what you want to drink and have a good time, you guys. What are you saying? Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the palace, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, all right, this guy's been imbibing for a week, okay? His heart is merry with wine. Okay. He commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, whatever, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass. How'd you like to have a name like that? Carcass. Hey, Carcass. The turkey leg down. Get over here, Carcass. All right.
Ahasuerus. Wait, King Ahasuerus, is that Xerxes?
Yes. They were the seven eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus. To bring Vashti.
Ahasuerus.
Yeah, Ahasuerus. Is that how you say it?
Ahasuerus.
You do.
I don't know what I did.
Oh.
I'm
Ahasuerus.
fondling stuff and things are popping up, so I'll leave the mouse alone. Ahasuerus? Did you Google that?
Ahasuerus.
It's easy
King
for you to say.
Ahasuerus.
Ahasuerus, polyphorphor for thief, whatever that stuff was.
It's
Porphyry.
Xerxes, isn't it?
Porphyry.
It's Xerxes.
Okay,
Xerxes.
Xerxes, yeah. Is it
Thank you.
Xerxes or Artaxerxes?
It's
What?
Xerxes.
What
It's
is-
All right.
Ahasuerus is the same guy as Xerxes.
Yes.
Xerxes.
Xerxes was the king of Medo-Persia.
Persia.
Persia.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Okay, so to bring the Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and the princes, for she was beautiful. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. I'm not going. Then the king became very angry, and his wrath burned within him because he was 3 sheets to the wind, and he wanted to show off his wife,
No.
and she ain't going to have any of it. So eunuchs are not the people to go get her. So if she wants to be drawn into the royal presence, he'd better get out of his chair and drag himself over there and do it himself. Don't you go sending me any eunuchs. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for it was the custom of the king so to speak before all who knew law and justice. And there were close to him Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Miris, Marsina, and Memykan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence and sat in the first place in the kingdom. Now, picture this. Okay, you've got the 7 princes of Persia and Media. You have the
And
7
they're men,
eunuchs that are
right?
hanging around. I'm sorry.
Princes are men back then
Yes.
still?
Well,
Okay.
yeah, everybody was men. Thank you for that. Yes, they were men. They were biological men, as men are given to be. Anyway, so they're in the palace, and they had been doing a celebration of 6 months, and there's peace within this kingdom for the most part. Because Xerxes was a pretty wise guy, not a wise guy. He was wise, and he was a guy. Anyway, so in celebration of this, he extends this feast for another 7 days, and he asks or he tells his queen to come forward so that he can show her off because she is truly beautiful, and he wants everybody to see that the crown and the pinnacle of his empire is his wife, and she refuses to come. She ain't having any of it. He's drunk. He's hanging out with his buddies and his cousins and his nephews and his friends, and they smell bad, and they've been hanging around in this thing for 6 months and another week, and she doesn't want anything to do with it. According to law, okay, where was I? Yes. According to the law, what is to be done with Queen Vashti? Because she did not obey the command of King Xerxes delivered by the eunuchs. In the presence of the king and the princes, Memucan said, Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but also all the princes and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all women, causing them to look with contempt on their husbands by saying, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought into his presence, but she refused, did not come. This day, the ladies of Persia and Media who have heard of the queen's conduct will speak in the same way to all the king's princes, and there will be plenty of contempt and anger. She's starting a movement. She's starting rebellion, and they're not going to have any of this. Something has to be done because they're going to squish this right now. If it pleases the king, let the royal edict be issued by him, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media so that it cannot be repealed, that Vashti may no longer come into the presence of the king. Whatever.
Why aren't you calling it who's
Ahasuerus.
Ahasuerus, thank
Yeah.
you, because I can't pronounce it.
Oh, okay.
I'm tongue-tied tonight.
Okay.
Ahasuerus. And let the king give her royal position to another who is more worthy than she. Because if she's not going to come when the king tells her to show up, then she doesn't deserve to be in the presence of the king at all. Out you go. When the king's edict, which he will make is heard throughout all his kingdom, great as it is, then all women will give honor to their husbands, great and small. This word pleased the king and the princes, and the king did as Memucan proposed. So he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province according to its script, and to every people according to their language, that every man should be master in his own house, and the one who speaks in the language of his own people. Rebellion squished. Peace descended on the valley, and there was a hush over the crowd. After these things, when the anger of King
I don't
Go
know.
ahead. Ahasuerus.
Ahasuerus.
Whereas.
Thank you.
Where
Um,
are you
Ahasuerus.
getting that? Where are you getting that name from?
From the
It's
Bible.
right here in 2. Queen, after these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had subsided, he remembered Vashti.
Yeah. And what she
No,
had
it's
done.
Xerxes. What? It's still Xerxes in
Which
mine.
version, which translation do you have?
I have Ahasuerus.
I do too.
So do I.
It's the same person, Xerxes and
the-
Ahasuerus.
This is the one we generally use, which is the New
New
American Standard Bible, NASB.
Yep. That's what I
You
have.
I use the NIV.
There you go. That's why it's coming
That's
up
why
as
he's
different.
Xerxes. But it's the same guy.
It's the same guy, just a
Well-
different name. Xerxes is the, I don't know what it is, some translation, but this one here is Ahasuerus.
But now we
Okay.
know him both names. So
Yes. Then the king's attendants, wait a minute. Wait, did it get to be D2? After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. She's thinking, oh man, this isn't good. Then the king's attendants who served him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. Let the king appoint overseers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather every beautiful young virgin to the citadel of Susa, to the harem, into the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let their cosmetics be given them. Then let the young lady who pleases the king be queen in place of Vashti. And the matter pleased the king, and he did accordingly. Now, there was at the citadel in Susa a Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite, which means he comes from the tribe of Benjamin, who had been taken into exile from Jerusalem with the captives who had been exiled with Jeremiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had exiled. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther. Her Hebrew name was Hadassah. They changed it to Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father or mother. Now the young lady was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter.
Oh.
So it came about, when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the custody of Haggai, that Esther, Hadassah, was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Haggai, who is in charge of the women. Now, the young lady pleased him and found favor with him. So he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and food, gave her 7 choice maids from the king's palace, and transferred her and her maids to the best place in the harem. Clearly, she had found favor with this man. because she had a style and she had a way about her. And when she swept into the room, it was as if just the joy of life was all. I'm sorry. Anyway. Excuse me. Esther did not make known her people or her kindred that she was Jewish. Okay, she didn't let anybody know that she was Jewish. Or for Mordecai instructed her that she should not make them known, because the Jewish people were not in great favor, and they were ostensibly slaves. They'd been there for quite a while. Xerxes gave the go ahead to rebuild the temple, and it was 70 years after captivity, so they'd been in there almost 3 generations. And so we can imagine that Esther is probably in her mid to late teens, and she's Jewish, and Mordecai's telling her, keep that on the down low. You don't need to have that go out. Okay. Every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and how she fared. Now, when the turn of each young lady came to go into King Ahasuerus, after the end of the 12 months under the regulations for the women, for the days of their beautification were completed as follows: 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with spices and cosmetics for women. Talk about a pampering. I mean, almost like a
beauty contest.
Not just a beauty contest, but it's also
Purification.
this is what you do with livestock. Where you're beautifying them and fattening them up before the sale and everything else. So you can have a competition. You brush their coats. You oil.
So we have a year to get ready for this beauty contest.
Yes, exactly. So that the king can choose which of the virgins he plans to violate.
What a pig.
Yeah. Okay. 13. The young lady would go into the king in this way. Anything that she desired was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening, she would go in, and in the morning, she would return to the second harem, to the custody of Shashgaz. Now, how would you like that as a name? It sounds like you're sneezing. Shashgaz. The king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not again go into the king unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. So she had to be summoned, otherwise she could not enter the presence. You can't go in before the king without having been summoned. Okay. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the daughter of the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, came in to go into the king, she did not request anything except that Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women, advised. So he's there coaching her. Whatever you do, okay, you go in, you bow low, you look at the ground, don't put your finger in your nose, sit up straight, talk only when you talk to, don't make eye contact,
Joking.
Don't flit around the room, don't make any silly noises, don't move. Whatever you do not move. The king hates it when you move. I know this for a fact. Why do you think I'm a eunuch? Okay, so he tells her, he's been coaching her. When you go in there, do this, do this, do this, do this. Okay. And Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. She was a pleasant woman, very compliant, ready to do her job. So Esther was taken to the king, Ahasuerus.
Ahasuerus.
Xerxes is fine.
Sorry.
Xerxes.
To his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. He's been king for 7 years. The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness with him more than with all the other virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his princes and his servants. He also made a holiday for the provinces and gave gifts according to the king's bounty. He's just smitten. He's absolutely smitten, and he is celebrating. He's got a new king, and she is just beautiful. And she's demure, and she's soft-spoken, and she doesn't move. And she shows up when she's summoned. That's the big thing. She shows up when she is summoned. Okay? Then the virgins were gathered together the second time. Then Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not yet made known her kindred or her people, even as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther did what Mordecai told her, as she had done when under his care, because that's her niece, and he's caretaking her, and that's ostensibly her father. In those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's officials, came from those who guarded the door, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. But the
Xerxes is
plot
nice.
became known to Mordecai, and he told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. Excuse me, sire. There's two guys here that are trying to lay hands on you, and they intend to do you harm. Mordecai told me this. The guy outside the gate, the guy there, that guy, he told me. Now, when the plot was investigated and found to be so, they were both hanged on the gallows. Not Mordecai and Esther, the two guys that were intending to do harm to the king. They were hanged on the gallows, and it was written in the book of Chronicles of the king's presence. After these events, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hamadatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. So this guy is now in charge. He's like the prime minister, okay? This guy's got ultimate authority. He can do whatever he wants. All the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why are you transgressing the king's command?" Now it was, when they had spoken daily to him, and he would not listen to them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reason would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And Jews do not bow to anybody but the living God, because there is only one God. When Haman saw that Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage to him, Haman was filled with rage. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him who the people of Mordecai were. Therefore, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, that is, the lot, was cast before Haman from day to day and from month to month until the 12th month, that is the month Adar. Then Haman said to the king Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of other people, and they do not observe the king's laws, so it is not in the king's interest to let them remain. If it is pleasing to the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry on the king's business to put into the king's treasuries."
I heard that that's equivalent to $20 million.
Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. So this is Hitler was equated as a second coming of Haman.
Ooh.
Man was determined to wipe out all the Jews. And
I thought this was about money, that they needed the wealth of the Jews to take over the Greeks.
What do you mean?
I mean, this whole taking of the Jews and killing of the Jews, wasn't this to get their wealth to continue their campaign against the Greeks?
Well,
Let's
some of it was that, but it was also Mordecai was butthurt, for lack of a better phrase.
He just wanted to slaughter him
Excuse me, not
because
Mordecai.
his
Haman was
feelings were
butthurt.
hurt. Haman got his feelings hurt, so that was it. He was going to kill them all.
Well, he's in charge. This guy's in charge. And he's like, if you're not going to bow to me, and it's not just that Mordecai did this, and he's a Jew. And so in Haman's mind, all Jews are going to scoff at Haman. We can't have that going on. You can't have anybody in the country here be separate from the king's laws. That won't stand. So if they're not going to change, so let's get rid of them.
Mhm.
We see this kind of prevalent thinking even today. Not necessarily against the Jews, but you see anybody that doesn't agree with the status quo is immediately neutralized through the cancel culture,
Yes,
and they are immediately shunned
you're
and
right.
and
Good Lord.
turned into nothing.
I didn't equate those two, but you're right. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
So he's got political reasons for this, but he also has personal reasons for this, and he also has governmental reasons for this. You can't have a people within a people who are not part of the people, because it's much like when the Queen Vashti was summoned and she didn't show up, the king then had Vashti excoriated and tossed out of the queendom. And the same with Haman. If you're going to have these people that are not going to bow down to him and they're not going to show him honor, then you can't have them around. It's the same as having Vashti not show up. He's going to lose honor, and then the Jews will, they'll get it in their heads that they can dishonor anybody. And so we just nip this in the bud, and before they can get to that point, we're just going to get rid of all of them. That's
my
his
gosh,
thinking.
we're just gonna kill them.
Yep, we'll just put them to death, and that'll be the end of it. That's verse 8, his explanation in verse 8. There's a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of the other people, and they do not observe the king's laws, so it is not in the king's interest to let them remain. Now, this is also part of the reasoning of the Sanhedrin when it came to Jesus. They were under the domination of the Roman Empire and of the laws of Caesar, and they were allowed to remain autonomous, provided they lived and acquiesced to the Roman rule. The Romans, rather than wipe them out, because they were very stubborn people in that regard, chose to allow them to continue, provided that they didn't cause trouble. And here comes Jesus claiming to be the king of the Jews.
Yeah.
And this is going to cause a political problem. So it's better to get him out of there than it is to have the Romans crush everybody, which they ended up doing anyway. But that's not the point. The point is, at the time, they thought, okay, this guy's expendable. For the sake of all the other people, we'll get rid of this guy. Okay.
Despite everything he did, they said, let's kill him anyway.
Well, yes, because of the Shema, for a great deal. The Shema, behold, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Which meant in their eyes, one being a singular entity, a singular event, if you will. And that the man Jesus walking around, though he did the things of God, he spoke the things of God, he demonstrated the power of God, he talked about the kingdom of God, it couldn't possibly be that he was God. He was just a guy claiming to be God, and that's not cool. Now here's the thing about Israel and its singular place in all the world at that time, and to a great degree for centuries before and after. Most of the rest of the world was polytheistic. They had multiple gods. They had layers and layers of gods. You had the Romans, you had the Greeks, you had the Hindus, you had out to the east, you had the Persians, you had whomever, but they had multiple gods. And in Israel, there was a singular God. Israel was, as far as it went with the rest of the planet, the only monotheistic country on the planet. The only monotheistic. You could go anywhere you wanted to. You could go to India. You could go to China. You could go to Rome. You could go to Greece. You could go to England. You could go to wherever and claim to be a god. And they're like, one among many. Okay. But if you showed up in Israel and said you were God, they would kill you for it. Because they're like, no. We have God and only God. There isn't multiple layers of gods. There is God and just God. And we don't play around with that. So for Jesus to show up, being a Jew, being a teacher, and to make statements that were of the nature that he and God are the same person. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. If you've seen the Father, you've seen me. I and the Father are one. That's, how do you interpret that as other than I'm God? This is what he's saying. I'm God. That I am the incarnation of God on earth. And so as the Israelites are there, their intention is immediately shut this man up, because not only is he blaspheming, but people will get a hold of that thought and they'll take that for action. And it's going to start some kind of a movement. And the next thing you know, we're going to have the Romans in here killing everybody.
Okay. Yeah.
So shut him up. let's just quiet him. Let's get rid of him. So it's the same thing with Haman. He sees Mordecai out there and he says, no. You guys, you have an autonomous culture, but we're not going to let that spread. Pretty soon you're going to have everybody, showing us dishonor in the whole 9 yards. So no, let's just get rid of all of you.
Hmm.
9, if it's pleasing to the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry on the king's business to put into the king's treasuries. He'll even pay for the mass executions. 10, then the king took his signet ring from his own hand, and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. 11, the king said to Haman, the silver is yours, and the people also, to do with as you please.
Oh my goodness.
Handle this in whatever way you see fit, dude. And here's my signet ring. So you send up the decree and you can press it onto the wax, and it goes with all the authority as if you are the king himself. 12, then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and it was written just as Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, and to the princes of each people, each province according to its script, each people according to its language, being written in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring. The letters were sent by courier to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to seize their possessions as plunder.
What
A
month
cop-
is that for us? I mean, what month is it?
7th month, Adar.
The 13th, why the 13th day of the 12th month?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, it's the 12th month. The first month is Nisan, and the 12th month is Adar. So you have basically a year. But to get all these people together, but on this day, the 13th day of Adar, we're wiping them all out.
Now,
So-
is that Purim that we're talking about now?
Nope, not yet. Not
Okay,
yet.
sorry.
It's okay. But this is the Kristallnacht, right? In Germany, where
What's
they go and
Kristallnacht?
where they break all the glass, crystal being glass,
Oh.
Nacht being night, the night of broken glass. And they go through and they're burning synagogues and they're smashing windows and they're emptying the homes and of the Jewish people and dragging them into captivity to put into concentration camps for slave labor. They're gathering up all their belongings and they're splitting it amongst themselves as plunder. Here we have a reintroduction of this, and we have another occurrence of this within, well, not our lifetimes, but very close to it.
Mhm.
Okay, which is in my thinking why the Lord raised up the United States to combat that, so that He had a generation of very hardened people, physically hardened, emotionally hardened, very moral people to go in and eliminate that threat to the Jewish people. Because had they succeeded in wiping out all the Jews, there would never be an Israel. And the whole point is there is a winnowing fork, and there's a separating the wheat from the chaff. And Ezekiel's vision of the valley of dry bones, and suddenly there is on earth again another Jewish Israel in its historic place, speaking Hebrew.
Only because of the US
Mm.
being our ability to go in with
Right.
the Russians and
Well, the Russians
stop the
liberated,
Germans.
but the Russians were as bad to the Jews as the Nazis were with their pogroms and everything else. The United States
Okay,
went in and liberated, but our State Department didn't have much love for the Jews because they held up their advance to Jerusalem under the Palestine Mandate and under the British Mandate, and yeah, that's a can of worms, but that's worth study. And it's a fictionalized account, but it's a really, really good read because it humanizes the story to a great degree. If you haven't read it, Leon Uris,
how do you spell
Uris,
it?
Leon, Leon. His last name is Uris, Uris. He wrote the book Exodus because that was the name of the ship. All these Jewish survivors of the concentration camps made their way, and they were trying to go to Palestine, to Zion. They're trying to make their way to Zion, and the difficulties that they encountered there. And it is an excellent book. It's historically based, but it's fictional historical fiction, but it's a really good book.
So do
They
they
even
make
made
it to Palestine?
Well, that's what they called it. Palestine was the Roman name for Jerusalem in that area, and they
Oh.
named it Palestine because it was an insult to the Jews. Palestine was the Roman version of the word Philistine. So,
Oh.
yeah, they referred to the Jews as, oh, look at these Philistines. Basically, this is the Philistine because the Jews that was the hated enemy of the Jews. And so, just to needle them and to get under their skin, that's what they called it. Okay, so where am I? 14.
Oh.
Chapter 3, verse 14. A copy of the edict to be issued as law in every province was published to all the people so that they should be ready for this day. The couriers went out impelled by the king's command while the decree was issued at the citadel in Susa, and while the king and Haman sat down to drink, the city of Susa was in confusion. So all of these things all of these edicts, this order has been sent out, and people are up in the air. They're like, "What are we doing here? What's going on here? We got to gather all these people up, and on the 13th of Adar, we're going to kill them all. All right, let's get busy." And so they're sending out, squads to round people up and to take their stuff and all of it. Okay, chapter 4. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly. His heart was broken. He was calling out to the Lord. He went as far as the king's gate, for no one was to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. He went as far as the king's gate and sat in sackcloth and ashes there, mourning the fate that had befallen the Jews. In each and every province where the command and decree of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay on sackcloth and ashes. This is what it takes to get the attention of God's people. He says, if my people who call me by my name repent and humble themselves, I will remake their land. This is what he tells us. And this is an example of this. His people gathered together knowing that their time is short, knowing that there's a date set, a specific date set for their destruction. 4. Then Esther's maidens and her eunuchs came and told her, and the queen writhed in great anguish. And she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, that he might remove his sackcloth from him, but he did not accept them. He's going to wear the sackcloth and the ashes as a physical symbol of what's being done for the people of Israel. Then Esther summoned Hathach,
Haytak.
Gesundheit, from the king's eunuchs, whom the king had appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn that it was what this was and why this was. So Haytak went out to Mordecai to the city square in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict, which had been issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show Esther and inform her, and to order her to go into the king to implore his favor and to plead with him for her people. Hathach came back and related Mordecai's words to Esther. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and ordered him to reply to Mordecai. 11, quote, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who comes to the king in the inner court who is not summoned, he has but one law, that he be put to death, unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter so that he may live. And I have not been summoned to the king to come to the king for these 30 days. They related Esther's words to Mordecai. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the other Jews. As soon as they find out you're a Jew, you're done. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. God's going to save his people. Here's your opportunity to be the person that affects that change. But understand, if it's not you, you're going to fall subject to the curse that Haman has put on us, and God will find another way. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this.
Where are we at? Oh, 14.
14. Now, think about that. Why were you saved? Why did the Lord call to you and bring you out of the darkness? Why did the Lord deliver you from sin and death and deliver you into life, so that in this day and age you could be a light to the many. He's going to save people because that's what he does. He's going to save people. He's going to deliver people. He is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He has commissioned us to be his mouthpiece to a great degree. He will either use us or he won't. If we fight him on this, he's simply going to do it and move around us. But the purpose for which you were saved is to save others. That's the whole reason we exist. 15. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, assemble all the Jews who were found in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my maidens will also will fast in the same way. And thus I will go into the king, which is not according to law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. Now it came about on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's rooms. And the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. When the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. His heart melted. And the king extended to Esther the golden scepter which was in his hand. So Esther came near and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said to her, what is troubling you, Queen Esther, and what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be given to you. Ask me for anything you want. I'll even give you up to half my kingdom. Esther said, if it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him. Excuse me. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly, that we may do as Esther desires. So the king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther had prepared. As they drank their wine at the banquet, the king said to Esther, what is your petition? For it shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to 1/2 of the kingdom, it shall be done. So Esther replied, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and do what I request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king says. Then Haman went out that day glad and pleased of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand up or tremble before him, Haman was filled with anger against Mordecai. Haman controlled himself, however, went to his house and sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches, the number of his sons, and every instance where the king had magnified him, and how he had promoted him above the princes and the servants of the king. Haman's really full of himself, and now he's been invited to go to the queen's dinner. This he's upwardly mobile.
So when he recounted to them, he was recounting to his family?
Yes, he's
Okay.
bragging, basically. He's bragging about how wealthy he is and what he's done and how many kids he has and all this other stuff, as if he's in charge of that.
Okay.
Haman also said 12. Haman also said, even Esther the queen, let no one but me come into the king to the banquet. Come with the king to the banquet which she had prepared. And tomorrow also I am invited by her with the king.
Mm.
Yet all of this does not satisfy me. Every time I see that Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate, this guy is really bugging me. Then Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends said to him, have a gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the banquet. And the advice pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. So his intention is he is not only going to kill Mordecai, he is going to do it in a spectacular fashion and get this burr out from under his saddle. 6. During the night, the king could not sleep, so he gave an order to bring the book of records, the chronicles, and they were read before the king. It was found written that Mordecai had reported concerning Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who were doorkeepers that had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. The king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? Then the king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. So the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows which he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, "Behold, Haman is standing in the court." And the king said, "No, let him come in." So Haman came in, and the king said to him, "What is to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor?" And Haman said to himself, "Whom would the king desire to honor more than me?" Then Haman said to the king, "For the man whom the king desires to honor, let them bring a royal robe, which the king has worn, and the horse on which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown has been placed. And let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble princes, and let them array the man whom the king desires to honor, and lead him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, 'Thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor.'"
Mm.
I love this.
Oh,
I
wow.
love
This is great.
Yeah.
Then the king said to Haman, "Take quickly the robes and horse as you have said, and do so for Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not fall short in anything of all that you have said."
Ooh.
Imagine the silence
And the face.
and the face. It's as if all the little strings in his face were cut. Oh.
Uh-huh.
So
That
Haman
was good.
took the robe and the horse and arrayed Mordecai with his teeth clenched and his eyes narrowed
Yeah.
and led him on
Attached the
horse.
gallows.
Yeah.
Haman is leading Mordecai through the town. He's put the robe and the crown and everything on him, put him on his horse, and he is leading him through the city square and proclaiming before everybody, "Thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor."
Oh, irony.
Yeah.
Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried home, mourning with his head covered.
Big
Haman
baby.
recounted to Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and Zeresh said, his wife said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. Because if this is how the king is going to honor him, and you're going to have the Jews all killed, this isn't going to go well."
Mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hastily brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Oh, yeah, there's that banquet. Oh, man. Now the king and Haman came to drink wine with Esther the queen. And the king said to Esther on the second day also, as they drank their wine at the banquet, "What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be done." Then Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me as my petition, and my people as my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Now, if we had only been sold as slaves, men and women, I would have remained silent, for the trouble would not be commensurate with the annoyance to the king." Then King Ahasuerus asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? And where is he? Who would presume to do this? Who is selling you? Who is going to sell you and have you annihilated and murdered? Who's going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Give me a name." Esther
Mm.
said, "A foe and an enemy is this wicked Haman." That guy right there. Yeah.
A dirty bastard.
Mm-hmm.
Then Haman became terrified before the king and queen. He jumps to his feet. No, wait a minute. Let me explain. The king arose in his anger from drinking wine and went into the palace garden, but Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther. "Oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please." For he saw that harm had been determined against him by the king. Now, when the king returned from the palace garden into the place where they were drinking wine, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. And the king said, "Will he even assault the queen with me in the house?" He's probably grabbing her like, "Oh, please, oh, please, oh, please." He's begging her for his life, but the king walks back in and he sees this man manhandling his wife, the queen. And he's like, "This guy's there's no end to his chutzpah."
Good choice.
Thank you.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. Then the king said, "Will he even assault the queen with me in the house?" As the word went out from the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. They threw a bag over his head. Probably beat on him a little bit too. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs who were before the king, said, "Behold, indeed, the gallows standing at the Haman's house is 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the king." And the king said, "Hang him on it."
Oh. Hang him on his own gallows. Ooh.
Wow.
So they
Ooh.
hanged Haman on the gallows, which he had prepared for Mordecai,
Oh.
and the king's anger subsided.
Wow.
On the day King
God does have a sense of
Ahasuerus,
humor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He loves irony. God
Mm.
definitely loves irony. On the day King
This is
Ahasuerus
irony,
gave the
yeah.
house of Haman, on that day, he gave the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had disclosed what he was to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had taken away from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Then Esther spoke again to the king, fell at his feet, wept, and implored him to avert the evil scheme of Haman the Agagite with his plot which he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the golden scepter to Esther, so Esther arose and stood before the king. Then she said, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor before him, and the matter seems proper to the king, and I am pleasing in his sight, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are all in all of the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the calamity which will befall my people? And how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred?" So King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Behold, I have given the house of Haman to Esther, and to him they have hanged on the gallows because he had stretched out his hands against the Jews. Now you write to the Jews as you see fit in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for a decree which is written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's signet ring may not be revoked." So the king's scribes were called at the time in the third month, that is, the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces. It extended from India to Ethiopia, 127
Wow.
provinces, to every province according to its script, and to every people according to their language, as well as to the Jews according to their script and their language. He wrote in the name of the king Ahasuerus and sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horses, riding on steeds sired by the royal stud, which was not a eunuch. In them, the king granted the Jews who were in each and every city the right to assemble and to defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate the entire army of any people or province which might attack them, including children and women, and to plunder their spoil. So they could turn the tables and go after those who were seeking. He didn't eliminate the last edict; he modified it,
Mm.
Mm.
seeing that the Jews could defend themselves against this attack.
Why wouldn't he just cancel the previous one?
Because it says anything that's signed with the king's signet ring cannot be reversed.
Oh, okay.
In one day, excuse me, on 12, on one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, the 13th day of the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, a copy of the edict to be issued as law in each and every province was published to all the people, so that the Jews would be ready for this day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers, hastened and impelled by the king's command, went out riding on the royal steeds, and the decree was given out at the citadel in Susa. Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal robes of blue and white, with a large crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. For the Jews there was light and gladness and joy and honor. In each and every province and in each and every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree arrived, there was gladness and joy for the Jews, a feasting and a holiday.
Hmm.
And many among the peoples of the land became Jews, for the dread of the Jews had fallen on them.
They
They
I don't like
became
how that's
Jews?
worded. Yeah, what does that mean? And many among the people
They became Jews because
for the dread of the Jews had fallen
they
on
were
them?
afraid that the Jews would go after them. So they
Oh,
became Jews.
okay.
Can you be, okay,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
you can become a Jew?
Yes.
Okay,
Not by blood, but by religion.
yeah, okay.
Now, in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, when the king's command and edict were about to be executed, and the day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain the mastery over them, it was turned to the country so that the Jews themselves gained the mastery over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. What?
You froze.
I froze?
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
that's okay.
I'm going to okay. The verse 2 of chapter 9. The Jews assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm, and no one could stand before them, for the dread of them had fallen on all the peoples. Even all the princes of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and those who were doing the king's business assisted the Jews, because the dread of Mordecai had fallen on them. Indeed, Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces, for the man Mordecai became greater and greater. Thus the Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying. They did what they pleased to those who hated them. At the citadel in Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men.
Oh, my goodness.
In Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Aradatha, Harmashta, Arasai, Aradai, and Vizatha. Yeah, there you go. The 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hamadatha, the Jews' enemy. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. On that day, the number of those who were killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king. The king said to Esther, Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and 10 sons of Haman, the 10 sons of Haman at the citadel in Susa. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It shall even be granted to you. And what's your further request? It shall also be done. Then said Esther, if it pleases the king, let tomorrow also be granted to the Jews who are in Susa to do according to the edict of today, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. So the king commanded that it should be done so, and an edict was issued in Susa, and Haman's 10 sons were hanged. The Jews who were in Susa assembled also on the 14th day of the month Adar, and killed 300 men in Susa, and they did not lay hands on the plunder. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's provinces assembled to defend their lives and rid themselves of their enemies, and kill 75,000 of those who hated them. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. This was done on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. But the Jews who were in Susa assembled on the 13th and the 14th of the same month, and they rested in the 15th day and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. Therefore, the Jews of the rural areas who live in the rural towns make the 14th day of the month Adar a holiday for rejoicing and feasting and sending portions of food to one another. And that is what Purim is.
Oh,
When
And
Mordecai
that is what,
recorded
Rick, what was that? That is what?
what Purim
What was
is,
that word?
Purim, Purim,
Purim, Purim,
Thank
which
you.
just occurred Monday and Tuesday. According to the Hebrew calendar, that was the 12th and 13th days, or excuse me, the 13th and 14th days of Adar. Then Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them to celebrate the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same month, annually, every year, because on those days the Jews rid themselves of their enemies, and it was a month which was turned for them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make days of feasting and rejoicing and sending portions of food to one another and gifts to the poor. Thus the Jews undertook what they had started to do and what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, the son of Hamadatha, the Agagite, the adversary of all the Jews, had schemed against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is the lot, to disturb them and destroy them. But when it came to the king's attention, he commanded by letter that his wicked scheme, which he had devised against the Jews, should return on his own head, and that he and his own sons be hanged on the gallows. Therefore, they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur, and because of the instructions in this letter, both what they had been in this regard and what had happened to them. The Jews established and made a custom for themselves and for their descendants and for all those who allied themselves with them, so that they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days according to the regulation and according to the appointed time annually. So these days were to be remembered and celebrated throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city. And these days of Purim were not to fail from among the Jews, or their memory fade from their descendants. Then Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. He sent letters to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, namely words of peace and truth, to establish these days of Purim at their appointed times, just as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had established for them, and just as they had established for themselves and for their descendants, with instructions for their time of fasting and their lamentations. The command of Esther established these customs for Purim and it was written in the book. 10. Now King Ahasuerus laid a tribute on the land and on the coastlands of the sea, and all the accomplishments of his authority and strength, and the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and in favor with his many kinsmen, one who sought the good of his people, and one who spoke for the welfare of his whole nation.
Wow.
The end.
Amen.
Wow, that's incredible.
Now, this is several times that this has occurred. It begins with Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers.
Yes, that's what I was thinking too, Rick.
Yeah, and he's
Yes.
sold into slavery by his brothers, and he's put in a caravan. He's taken into Egypt. He's a slave in the household, and the wife has lustful thoughts after him, and he won't get with her, so to speak. And as a result, she accuses him of rape. And then Joseph is thrown into prison, and he's in prison, but he's in there for a while. And as the Pharaoh has need of someone to interpret a dream, Joseph is able to interpret that dream because of the will of God and because of the power of the Holy Spirit. And so he interprets the dream, and as a result of that, he is placed as the guy over all of Egypt.
Oh,
The Pharaoh puts his ring on his finger and a staff in his hand and says, "Here you go. You
Yes.
take care of things." He's the prime minister. Later on, the same thing happens with Daniel the prophet, and how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and all of them are dragged into Babylon when Nebuchadnezzar was king. And same thing. Daniel is able to interpret dreams for the king, and his interpretation of the dream, because I love the way the king does this. He gathers all his wise men and his seers and soothsayers and psychics and everything else, and he says, "I had a dream. I had this dream, and I need to know what it means." And he says, "Now here's the deal. You guys, you're supposed to be the real deal. So first off, you tell me what I dreamed, and then you tell me what that dream means." And all these guys are like, "Whoa, wait a minute. You want us to tell you what you dreamt?" And he's like, "Yeah, you guys are psychics. You should know this stuff." And they're like, "But nobody can do that." He says, "All right, well, then I'm going to kill all of you because you guys are just clearly you're fakes." So, and that meant all the people that he had in that kind of training, which included Daniel. And so before they go to kill Daniel, Daniel says, wait a minute, let me talk to God about this. Let me pray about this. And so he prays, and he comes back and he says, "O King Nebuchadnezzar, this is what the Lord showed me that you dreamed." And he explains the dream to Nebuchadnezzar, and then he explains what the dream means. And as a result of that, Nebuchadnezzar elevates him above everybody. And so now Daniel is in charge, and Daniel is a very, very holy man. And later on, when Darius takes over, when Babylon is overthrown, and Darius takes over, he is abusing his power and his station, and he's taking all the holy implements that they had captured in Jerusalem at the temple, and he's using them for a party, and he's drinking out of the goblets and using the candelabras and using the plates and everything else. And this hand appears out of nowhere and starts writing on the wall. And by this point, Daniel is extremely advanced in years, and so they're all trying to figure out. Well, it terrified them because there was a hand writing on the wall, and so they're like, "What does it mean? What does this writing mean?" And so the king's mother says there was this prophet that was good at this kind of thing. He could do this stuff. I don't know where he is now, or if he's even still alive, but if you can find him, go get Daniel. So they go get Daniel and they drag him in there, and he takes one look at what this is, and he's been praying about it. He's like, "Oh boy."
Writing on the wall?
The
Is that where
writing
that
on the
comes from?
wall. Yep.
Is that where this come from?
Yes,
I
it
never knew
is.
that.
Yep.
Me
I
either.
can read the writing on the wall, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so Daniel tells him, he says that your days have been counted and found wanting. Your kingdom ends tonight.
Wow.
And I'm paraphrasing here. That's not the exact words, but yeah, that night the Assyrians, was it the Assyrians? Persians came in and came in under the sewer system because Babylon was supposed to have been impregnable.
So
Nobody
who
could
came
get
to
through the
kill the
walls.
Assyrians? The
No,
Assyrians?
the Medo-Persians.
Medo-Persians?
Medo-Persians, and they came in and they killed Darius, and
Hmm.
they set up their kingdom, and that's who Xerxes was. Xerxes and Artaxerxes.
Wow.
So, okay, that's the second time. Third time, Daniel was in charge, and then there was Mordecai. And Mordecai was the third time, where he was set above everybody else because he was doing the will of the Lord.
What
So
book is this writing on the wall in?
look at Book
The
of
hand.
Daniel.
Oh, Dan, we haven't done that yet. I
We
don't
have,
know
well, we
anything about
did,
it.
but you weren't here for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago. But Daniel is another exceptional book, and if you read Daniel and then you read the book of Revelations, you understand that Revelations is simply a continuation and an amplification of what was taught in Daniel. And it has nothing to do with the church. It has absolutely nothing to do with the church. This has everything to do with the Jews, with the Jewish people, and because that's Daniel's prayer. What's going to become of my people? They were in captivity in Babylon, and his petition to the Lord was, "What's going to become of my people? What will happen to them?" And as a result of that, an angel was sent to him with a vision and explained what was taking place. And the revelation of John is much the same way. It mentions the church in the first 4 chapters, and then it no longer talks about the church at all. The church is never mentioned again, and it deals specifically with the Jewish people and how they receive Messiah, and what happens then when they begin to evangelize.
There is no church after the 4th chapter.
That's what it says. There is no
Excuse me.
reference to the church at all,
Wow.
because the days of the prophecy of Daniel that was about the Jewish people has yet to be fulfilled. There's another 7 years of that prophecy that has yet to be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is when the Jewish people receive Messiah and begin to evangelize. And it says that the number of people that they bring to the Lord during that time, which is the whole purpose, right? God set them apart as his nation of priests. And he says, you are going to be my people, and you're going to bring my word, and you're going to carry this word. And so when the church is taken out of the way, then the Jewish people receive Messiah, and their evangelistic efforts can't be numbered. And this is during the 3.5 years of the worst periods in all of the history. And Jesus said, unless those days were cut short, no one would survive, which is why he returns. He returns to save the planet, to save everybody, because otherwise, I mean, the descriptions in there by a first century man whose greatest technological endeavor he'd probably ever seen is the wheel. Now he's looking at nuclear fire, nuclear exchange, missiles, helicopters, rockets, tanks, planes, guns, you name it. Things he couldn't possibly have words for or names for. Other than it looked like a lion or a locust, or there was something stinging and fire and brimstone, and so there you go.
It's incredible.
I love the book of Esther. Here is this girl who by her beauty is elevated to the position of the queen. And she's under the tutelage of her uncle. And her uncle is telling her what to do, but she's also got this guy, this eunuch, who is telling her what to do. And she gains favor for just this event to save the Jewish people. Because there is a man that the enemy has raised up with power and authority, and he intends to kill all the Jews, all of them, sparing no one. But because the enemy is not omniscient, nor omnipotent, nor omnipresent, he can only deal with what he is shown and what he can surmise. He didn't know that Mordecai and Esther were uncle and niece. He didn't know that Esther was a Jew. It was stacked against him from the beginning. So
Love
there
that.
you go.
Me too.
And
It's incredible.
It is.
In the end, you have Purim, which was just
Do they
celebrated
still
last week.
spit on his name on that day? When
Mhm.
they'll hear?
Mention Haman.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible. Thank you for
Thank
Thank
you.
a great
Thank
Thank you for
release.
suggesting that, Trish. Thank you very
Mhm.
much.
Yes.
Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas?
I keep thinking of the lust of these men that it just their lust, how it changes the world for good. Like Henry VIII being kind of a pig, and going after Anne Boleyn. We have the Bible in English. And then here, this guy wants everyone to ogle his wife, and they're all a bunch of drunken pigs after 7 days of drinking. Let's ogle my wife. Want to see her? She's really pretty. She's like, I'm not going in there for that. And all because of that, you have the Jews get saved. Out of, the stinky lust of men come this wonderful thing that God turned around. I don't know. That just popped in my head.
What man intends for evil, God turns around and uses for good, to glorify
Amen.
himself, to do his will, to do that which is beneficial. But the thing is, and this being Women's Day, National Women's Day, or whatever it is, I don't know that women understand, really truly understand. Well, maybe you do. Maybe I'm just naive and I don't understand it. But I really do not think that women understand the power that they have when it comes to influencing men. When you stop and think about it, the reason we have bridges and roads and electric light and interior heat is because of women. As the pioneers are crossing the plains, if it's just a guy on horseback with his buddies, they don't care. They go down into the water, they cross through the mud, they do whatever, and they go on about their business. But they have their wives and their kids with them, and they get to this creek and they're like, come on. And she's like, no, I'm not walking through that. The kids will get swept away. I'm not getting dirt all over this dress because this is the only dress I have. No, find a way for me to get across that I'm not going to get dirty or wet. So now it's like, what is with her? What is with these women? What is with them? But what do the guys do? They go and they find a tree, they find a way, bring them across. Pretty soon you have a bridge.
I
And then you
never
have
knew
other
that's
women
why
come
we have
along. I'm not
bridges.
going over that. The thing's falling apart. Fix that. Pretty soon you
Build a
have a
better one.
concrete bridge or a steel, suspension
Yeah.
bridge. Pretty soon you have a beautiful bridge.
One of the best stories, though, is that your driver's license used to be the size of a full sheet of paper, and you'd have to fold it up and put it in your billfold. And a woman came in and said, "Why? You could make 15 different licenses out of one piece of paper." So the next thing you know, they have licenses that fit in your billfold and fit in your wallet. Amazing.
Yes,
That's incredible.
it
I
is.
had no idea we were so useful.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The one
I'll
thing
tell you
that
what, when it comes to that kind of thing, if a man has the support and the love of a woman behind him, he'll change the world. He will
Yeah.
change the world, and because he wants to do that for her, you know. And so, the power that you have over your spouses and your sons and your nephews and your friends is amazing, simply because men were put here to tend the planet and to fellowship with God. We were put here to garden and to take care of God's creation. And the women were put here to tend the men. And so when the women say to the men, "Hey, I need this done, I need this done," the honey-do list, that guy might grumble, but pretty soon you have the honey-do list done. Why? Because we love our women.
So the joke is, honey, when you get a minute, just get up and go get your tool belt now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Excuse me, I have to head on out, but I want to say thank you so much, Rick, and it's good to see everyone and you too, Trish.
Oh gosh, we went really long. I'm sorry.
What were you gonna
No,
say,
it was
Trish?
beautiful. I always enjoy our Bible study.
Love you
So
so. Wait, Trish, you were gonna say something. One
good
other
night,
thing about.
everyone. Thank
Good
you,
night,
Rick.
Sylvia.
Sylvia.
Bye-bye. See
Bye,
you next week,
honeys.
Lord willing. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Amen.
I think the one thing that women don't understand is how to support other women. And that's a big
Oh.
problem. And well, a lot of the problems in the world were because women did not support other women. And I think we're learning that. So you have to support each other. Because too many times women are I don't know, guilty of looking at other women and wanting what other women have rather than appreciating all the talents that you have within yourself. And I think once we come to know that, and that's what Esther was being told, You know, because Mordecai said, well, you know what? It's not going to help you any if you don't say anything and you're in a position to do something. And that's when she realized, I can do this. But what did she do? She went and fasted with the women that were around her.
Mm.
She fasted with them. And that gave her the strength to go forward. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to
She was
support each other.
afraid that he would kill her, maybe without being. She
Well,
wasn't.
Haman was pretty pretty powerful at that time. So going to the king was a pretty fearful point for her. But she fasted with the women that cared for her, and then she went forward. But she also told Mordecai to fast, you know. So, but I think if we take some time and just understand that we can support each other and not be so guilty of looking at other women and wanting, what they have. But if we support each other, it's much easier.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's jealousy that keeps women from supporting each other, or
I think it is. I think that green-eyed jealousy, yeah, it is.
like
We
weren't they thinking that about Esther, the other women in the harem? Like, oh, we have to. She's so pretty. Did they have to move her or something, or keep her separated so they
no, they
wouldn't be
didn't.
unkind?
No, they didn't have to because I think she had natural God-given beauty and grace. But what about Vashti? What was her name? Vashti?
Vashti, yeah.
Yeah, Vashti. I mean, she thought more highly of herself than she should, and as a result, she fell. But I think that the women tend to do that. We tend to look at other women and go, "Oh man, she's prettier than I am. She can cook better than I am. She runs better than I am." Da 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 da. Rather than supporting
Mhm.
the women and saying, "Hey,
I think
let's
you bring up a
support you.
good
And
point there.
let's see
I
how
think
far
you
you
bring,
can go." And the other thing is, I mean, just like women have in sports have really gone year after year after year to push Title X to make sure that they have sports, and now all of a sudden it's being taken over by men.
Yeah, how ridiculous. I can't even believe it.
So we need to support women. We need to say, hey, wait a minute. Women's sports is for women, and then support women and make sure that
I
they are supported.
had a
this
teacher
is,
lab today on sexing animals, and I was so happy to get the opportunity to say, we have the female symbol, the circle, the line, and the
Uh-huh.
line through it, and then the circle, the line, and the
Hmm.
arrow. And I said, in animal medicine, we only have two sexes.
That's right.
There's a male and a female. How do you sex them? The female is a slit, the male is a hole. Here, let me show you on this cat. And, a couple of the eyebrows looked, and I was like, this is just how it's been for the last 100 million years
That's how God made it.
until 15 minutes ago.
Hmm.
I mean, I didn't say that. I just said, this
Hmm.
is how do you sex an animal? You need to know who's going on the spay table and who's going on the castration table. You don't put a female on a castration table and you don't put a male on the spay table.
well, there's a reason. There's a reason for this, and that is for the confusion and the forced confusion and the contrived confusion. And that is, if you go back to the lesson of Sodom and Gomorrah,
Hmm.
these two cities were filled with apparently gay men,
Hmm.
and it was extremely violent. And it was to the point that the rumor of it, according to scriptures, had reached the ears of God, and he was so disapproving, he was going to destroy it. And then when a heterosexual man, Abraham and Lot, come along, and they try to intercede on behalf of the people there in Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot's like, if you find 50 righteous people, will you spare? Yeah, 40, 30, 20, 10. And he didn't go any farther than 10. And so when the angels showed up to bring Lot and his family out, they go to Lot's home. They go inside Lot's home, and you can imagine that they had to sneak them in and shut the door right away because this crowd gathers outside of Lot's home, and they're like, "You have men in there. We want them. Send them out here. We want to have sex with them.
Like fresh blood.
Fresh
No,
blood."
so Lot was
They
willing to give his daughters.
Yeah, he
didn't
offers
want
them the
them.
daughters, and they said, "No,
Mhm.
we
No,
what
no,
do we
thank
want?
you.
What do we want the women for? We've got these guys. Give us these guys." Okay,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
this is and has been the plan all along.
The enemy's plan.
God created Adam for himself. He created Eve for Adam. That's the hierarchy as established by God. Okay. The enemy intends to and is practicing through practice is twisting that so that Eve is eliminated from the picture altogether. Women are no longer part of that. They intend to pervert what God has created. Men with women, man for God, women for men, men for women, that eliminate the women. If you have the men posing as women, men acting as women, men pretending to be women, men in transition to womanhood, now you have the men taking over and eliminating women. What are women? When that train gets rolling and it gets enough steam under it, what purpose will women serve?
But it's also the emasculation of man, because man can no longer be the protector.
But what is
Because he
the
is
emasculation for? For an imitation of the
right.
woman.
Right.
It's about the perversion of the male. Perversion of the male, perversion of the male. So when you talk about supporting women, I absolutely agree. You guys need to get together and fight this
Well, that's what we're trying to do. Yep.
through prayer and fasting.
Right.
As you were talking about, you make a really good point there that when we fast, we're submitting. We submit to God.
Mm-hmm.
When we pray and we fast together, we're submitting, as it says in Ephesians, we are submitting one to another, but we're also submitting to God. And that's the whole point. We submit to God.
I
Our
thought this whole
submission,
movement was about confusion by the enemy.
yes,
And
yes,
the way you start is with the children.
Well,
yep.
when you have an alphabet soup, what does that mean? L, B,
What do you
G,
mean?
T, Q, X,
Oh,
M, 1, 6, 5. It's just ridiculous. It goes on and on and on.
Well, there's a purpose to that. There's an end game there, and the end game
Yeah.
is that you have men who are emasculated, as you said. You have masculine men, you have feminine men, but it's all men.
Uh-huh.
It's all men. The women are relegated to some position somewhere else. You even have the modern day feminists approving of men using women's bathrooms and approving of
and
men
women's
in
sports, they're
transition, and
approving of this? Where's all
they
the
approve.
feminists?
They
You have a
applaud it.
third, you have a third more lung capacity than women. You have more muscle mass. We can never be beaten. We can never beat you just by your biology. Where's all the feminism? Where's all the
Well, the
outrage?
feminists are wearing the vagina hats and going to Washington, D.C. and saying, terrible, stupid things. It's just stupid. But when you really think about it, we're fighting back, because now the comedians are coming to our aid.
Really?
And they are saying, wait a minute, we're fighting the cancel culture. They're fighting back and saying, you can't stop us. Comedy has always been a good force against evil, because they make they make people look at evil for what it is.
Mhm,
And they're beginning to do that. And I
mhm.
think that's really good.
Yeah. I saw Sebastian Maniscalco talking about his little girl's in preschool. She doesn't know the alphabet, but the little boy over there is known as Rory the lion. He's over there pretending to be a lion, disrupting the class. He's like, my little girl doesn't know the ABCs, but that kid Rory's disrupting the whole class. What, and it was making a joke of it. But I didn't know that about comedy being, it's true though. That's very good. I never knew that.
That's why they try to get rid of comedy, because comedy has always, your plays, all of these things have always turned against those things that have caused evil in the world. I mean, if you look at comedy, there's nothing safe in comedy. No
Yeah.
person is safe in comedy, because comics will come out and say, this is what's stupid. And they
Mhm.
say it in such a way that people start to listen to them and understand how stupid things are. And the cancel culture has needed comics to come in and explain to these mass followers that cancel culture stinks.
When they do this and you see them all laughing, they're in a safe place where they can laugh and say, this is ridiculous, we agree, or they clap. You can't say that in regular TV. You don't hear it in regular media. But you're right. The comics have a safe place, and then everyone's like, yes, yes, where have you been? Which, everyone's afraid to speak up in other situations.
But that's the beginning. Just like Esther showed, that's the beginning.
That's the beginning.
That's the beginning. You have to begin, and you have to begin to go back against cancel culture and say, cancel culture is not here. It's not good.
It's
And
stupid.
too many people have believed it. Too many people
Mhm.
look at the world and say there is no God. Well, you know, I heard it from a comedian a long time ago, and he said, you know what? There are two schools of thought on that. The first one is you don't believe and you get up there and you go, oops. But the best belief is to believe. And when you get up there, you can say, thank you. And
Mhm.
so that's it. The cancel culture has to be the one that tells these people God does exist. And you're seeing
Ugh.
more and more people on Facebook and more people in the world saying, I believe in God. I believe in Christ. I believe in the Lord.
Well,
And
that's
that's so
hopeful.
nice to see.
I didn't know that was happening.
There
That's
was a big, and I'm trying to remember, I think it was in Kentucky. It may have been Tennessee. They had 4 days or 5 days or 6 days of just going
like a
back and praying.
revival.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
praying
did
and
see that
praying and
on
praying.
social media. Yeah, there was a big,
in
they couldn't
Asbury.
move these people, right? They were stuck in that one place, like, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
All right,
Yeah.
and on that note, let's close the recording end of this, and then we can continue talking if you would like.
Okay.
So, would someone like to lead us in prayer?
Heavenly Father, we come to you right now and we thank you so much for all the gifts that you have given to us in the Bible, all the stories there that bring your word to us in such a meaningful, purposeful way. When you bring Esther's and Mordecai's to come and show us how evil can be slain in the Hamans, how you can take your word and make it so meaningful to us even today, so many years later. We thank you that we are touched in a very special way tonight by Esther, how she stood up bravely, and how that can help each and every one of us to grab your word, hang on to your word, and make your word meaningful to others. We ask today that you touch everyone in such a special way that we can make your word meaningful to the people around us and those who are in need. This we ask in your Son's most precious and holy name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 All right.
Thank you.
This ends the recording.